Welcome everyone to today's webinar on Getting Started with SharePoint 2010, hosted by Experts Exchange. I'm Jen Prentice with Experts Exchange, and I'd personally like to thank all of you for attending this webinar. We are thrilled to have Jamie McAllister, one of our top SharePoint experts on Experts Exchange, giving our presentation today. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Jamie in just a minute and let him give his presentation. But first, a few housekeeping items to note before we get started. If you take a look at the right side of your screen, you should see a chat window. This is where you can ask questions that you might have for Jamie about his presentation. Just type your question into the message box and it will be sent directly to me. If we have time at the end, we will address those questions. If not, Jamie and I will follow up with you after the webinar and make sure that you get an answer. Second, if any of you have to leave the webinar early, don't worry. We're recording Jamie's presentation and we will make it available to everyone within the next week. So as I said a minute ago, this webinar is hosted by Experts Exchange. I'm sure that by now most of you are familiar with the site, but if you're not, we are a technology resource where both individuals and businesses go to either troubleshoot problems that they're having with a certain technology or to further educate themselves about a technology. Earlier this year, we launched a redesign of Experts Exchange, so if you haven't been to the site in a while, you might want to come check it out. And now, in addition to over 3 million technology solutions and 24-hour access to tech experts and Microsoft MVPs like Jamie, we also have an in-depth tech training library of videos, a tech news blog, and an EE Tech News podcast and job board. So if you're attending this webinar and you are not currently an active member of Experts Exchange, which you should have indicated when you registered for the webinar initially, you'll be receiving a 30-day free trial to check out the site, no credit card required. If for some reason I do not send that to you, sometimes emails get bounced back at the end of the webinar, feel free to email me. My email will be up at the end of the webinar. So like I said, I want to tell you a little bit about Jamie. He has been using SharePoint since 2006 to implement solutions for clients across a wide range of industries in the UK, the US, and Switzerland. He's been a member of Experts Exchange since 2008, answering questions mainly on Microsoft Sharepoint, and he's currently one of the top-ranked experts in the Experts Exchange SharePoint zone. I believe that he has over 1 million points, which if anyone in SharePoint alone, not counting his other points on the site. So if any of you are familiar with Experts Exchange, you know that the experts answer questions and earn points for answering questions. So to have over 1 million points in SharePoint alone is quite a feat. Without further ado, I am going to turn this webinar over to Jamie to give his presentation on getting started with SharePoint 2010.
Thanks very much, Jen. Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I'm titling it SharePoint 2010 Lists and Libraries for the End User. As Jen said, my name is Jamie McAllister and I'm a SharePoint consultant in sunny Geneva, Switzerland. Now my day job is usually implementing SharePoint at client sites and making sure that clients get the best use out of their SharePoint install. One thing I've seen over the years while I've been doing that day job is many users are unaware of some of the features which they get with lists and libraries which would make their life much easier on a day-to-day basis. So I wanted to put this webinar together along with Experts Exchange to let you know about some of these features which are sometimes ignored. Okay, so what are we going to look at today? Well, first of all, I'm going to justify why we might be using lists in SharePoint at all. Hopefully, if you're convinced by that, we'll be looking at lists, the basic storage unit of information within SharePoint. We'll be seeing how we create lists, how we use them, how we create information inside them. Then we'll be looking at the concept of views, which allows us to sort and filter information in useful ways. We'll be seeing how we introduce basic validation into lists to make sure our data is of the quality and form that we need. We'll be seeing how we introduce versioning to lists. We'll see how content approval can ensure that the right content and the right message is published out to the readers of our content within SharePoint. And I'll be showing you how we can introduce basic relationships between the information in lists, which can be very useful. Moving on from that then, we'll talk about libraries, and we'll discover that libraries are actually just a specialized form of list. We'll see that they present richer versioning possibilities, major and minor versioning. They also allow us to check in and check out content whilst we're editing it to make sure that our edits don't clash with other people's editing. And we'll see that libraries are really about document storage. Finally, we'll discuss site columns and content types, which is a concept allowing good information management within your SharePoint site. Now, I don't want to introduce death by PowerPoint on this webinar, so most of it is going to be a demonstration with SharePoint itself. And for this, you'll have to bear with me. I have to flip between windows. Okay. If you're all familiar with SharePoint, this might be a familiar site. This is a default site which you get in the SharePoint product when a site is created. This is called a team site. It's really just a collection of pages and lists built on a pre-built template, and those lists and pages are designed to help teams get together on a task and collaborate on information and tasks and come up with a good end result. One thing you'll notice immediately, looking at the left navigation, there is already mention of libraries and lists here on the left. We actually get several lists and libraries created to do different discrete useful tasks for us in this type of site. Let's leap in and have a look at the Shared Documents library just to start getting an idea what a list or a library really is. Okay, so when I open this library, we can see it's actually already got a document in it, which I placed there earlier. This is called a document library, and it's for storing documents. Not just Word documents, by the way, any type of document. Not even Office documents. We could put images, Adobe files, you name it, could actually go in here. We see we have a link to the file, which is actually stored within here. We have the name of this file. We have some basic information about when it was modified and who it was modified by. You may notice that when I hover over the name, I get this drop-down menu here, which I can click on. The proper name for this is the Edit Control block. If I click on this, it drops down a menu, and there are lots of interesting things I can do with the file in the library. For instance, I could edit the properties of this document, which is a form of metadata information tagging, something we'll be talking about more in a while. I could edit the content of the document in Microsoft Word, as this is a Word document. And for instance, if I thought that one of my colleagues was interested in this document, I could email a link to others within the organization. Notice here, I would be emailing a link to it, not the document itself. So I wouldn't be sending a heavy attachment, file attachment to my colleagues. Okay, let's just go back to the front page then. That's a very basic idea of what a list is. So we see that we're holding some sort of content in a centralized place, and there's an emphasis there on not sending the file itself to other people. It remains in this central place to be used, and when other people want to view it or edit it, they will come here to do that. Let's see why we might want to play things that way. So why do we want to use SharePoint at all? Okay, here is a list of what you might find to be very common problems in the modern professional's work. If you're working in an office, you work with documents, you probably have some or perhaps all of these problems. You might have trouble collaborating on and sharing information with colleagues, such as developing documents or Excel spreadsheets. You may be sending documents between yourselves to share information, which may result in bulging email boxes. You might find have difficulty finding information that you need, you may be constantly searching on file shares or within your inbox to try and find that document attachment which you need right now. If your information is stored in file shares, it could well be organized in very complex folder structures which are difficult to navigate. And you may find that when team members move on to other teams or even other organizations, valuable information is lost. You may also be uncertain if many versions of documents and other material are being emailed around the company. Which one of those attachments is the authoritative latest version? Who can say? Okay, well, lists are here to help solve those problems, and let's have a look at lists in more detail now. Hopefully I can convince you that lists in SharePoint are a solution to some of these problems. Okay, without further ado then, I'm actually going to create a new list of our own. Since we've already examined the document library, let's see what lists are all about. To do this in SharePoint, I would click up here on Site Actions, and it should be a little more obvious. There's an option here, More Options. I actually have to click on that one, and then a dialog box will open, allowing me to choose what I would like to create. When it pops up, you will actually see it's going to show me lots of options. There are many types of thing that I could create within SharePoint. The suspense is killing me. There we go. Okay, as you can see, there's a bit of an overwhelming list here, but we can filter it over here by the type of thing we want to do. Now we want to create a list, so we'll click on that and filter. You'll notice even now there are lots of different types of predefined lists which we could create an instance of now. For instance, let's have a look at some of those. There's an announcements list which allows you to publicize information within your organization. There's a calendar so that you could store events and meeting times. There's a contact list which allows you to store the contact information for colleagues or perhaps customers. There's a discussion board which allows people to post questions or start debates within your organization, and for instance would allow you to start off a knowledge sharing exercise within your company. And there are several others down here which could be of interest depending on your needs. For my purposes, I want to create a custom list because I want to show you how to create a list from scratch. Now, as an example, I am going to create an example list called presenters. The scenario we're going to work with here is that in my organization I have a number of employees who like to do lunchtime presentations for knowledge sharing within the company, and so I want to keep a list of which of my employees have said that they're interested in doing these lunchtime presentations. So we'll click to create this list called presenters. Okay, excellent. So now we have a list. You can see many things look similar to the document library we saw just now. We have a title field here. We have a link to add new content. You may have noticed there was an add new item link on the document library we saw before. One other thing of particular interest which I didn't mention before was this concept of the ribbon. If you have ever used any of the recent Microsoft Office products like MS Word, MS Excel, you should be familiar with the concept of the ribbon already. This is a contextual view of options and actions which you can choose, and it changes what it displays based on what you're doing at the time to try and be the most helpful it can be. It usually has tabs so that you can also switch and see even further options to the ones it's showing you. Because I've just created a new list, it's opened it at me conveniently at the Lists tab. Now, this list is very simple. It's just got this title field. To be useful, I'm going to have to add some more fields, or actually we call them columns in SharePoint, so that I can put further information in here. There is a link here on the ribbon to do that. So if I click this, a window will open allowing me to define this new column which I want to create in the list. Now, a presenter has to have a name, so let's type that here. One thing you might notice below the column name, which I've typed just now, is that you can choose different types of information that the column will hold. A single line of text is the default, but if it was some other information, such as a presentation description, I might actually choose multiple lines of text that I wanted to store in a given column, which I wanted to define here. Choice field would allow me to define several fixed choices which people could select. That's if I didn't want them to type a column with any free value. We have number fields for numbers, here for currency. We can have columns that specifically store dates and times, links to people, etc. There are actually several here, and I encourage you to explore your options here if you can get your hands on SharePoint. Looking down here further, additional column settings, I can require that this new column that I create always has a value in it, otherwise the user will be warned that they can't save it. Require that this column contains information. Well, I think a presenter should have a name, so let's say yes, we want that. Enforce unique values, no, it's possible that two people in the organization could have the same name, so let's leave that. The number of characters, we don't need a default value, so we're okay. And there we have it. It's now been added as an extra column to the list. Let's go through that process again, because I'd like to know, for instance, which specialities my presenter has, so that I can ask them to do different types of presentation based on the specialities they have. Now, instead of this being free text, I want to tie this down a bit more. I'm going to select a choice. And when I select something different to single line of text, you may notice that down here, the settings that you're allowed to do have changed to suit the type of column which I selected above. I could also type a description here so that when people came along after, and they wanted to know what the speciality column was all about, they would see from the description what its intent was. It's good practice to do that, but I guess we're a bit pushed for time, so I might skip some of the little things like that. Should we require that this has a value? Well, no, maybe there won't be their specialism on the list. So let's type a few specialisms. You can see I put each choice on a different line. And I don't want this to be all about IT, so let's put some other things on here. Okay. Now, I also have the choice here, which effectively gives people the option to choose one of these and one only, or they could actually select several. Now, people may have several specialities, so I'm going to allow them to select several. And I don't think we need a default for this. Okay, that one. And once again, we get our new column here. Now, I'll hurry along a bit because I think everyone's comfortable with this idea. I also want a department, and this should also be choice. Yes, I definitely want a department. Okay, great. Someone's only going to be in one department, so we'll leave the default like this. We'll okay that one. Okay, so far so good. We have the basic information that we wanted here. Now you'll notice we still have this title column, which is a bit of a problem. I don't really want the title column. I have no need for it. The thing is, in a list, the title column on items is the thing that gives us that useful drop-down menu. So I don't really want to get rid of this, but I don't want it to be called title. One thing that might be useful to me, though, is a job title column. Now, bear with me here, but I'm actually going to go into the settings of the list to change the name of this. I can go into the list settings once again by clicking on the ribbon here. Now when I open this, there are quite a few options inside which I don't really want to ponder now, so please don't be worried about these. We will talk about some of these later in the webinar, but for now I just want to see the columns in here. This is a list of the columns that I created and some default ones which you don't really see, which are also in there. I'm going to click on title and I'm going to change it to job title instead. Okay, everything else looks fine to me. It's going to hold text. Great. I'm using this navigation feature here called the breadcrumb to go back to the list itself. There you go. Right, without further ado, let's create a list item in our brand new presenters list. So we click here, add item, and once again, a form opens, this time to allow us to add values. You'll notice that title, which is now job title, and presenter name, we marked as those being required, and also department. They have a red star against them to denote to the user that this is a required field. We must put a value inside, otherwise we won't be able to save a row within this list. Okay, so let's start off with me. I'm willing to do presentations. My specialisms. There we go, information services, excellent, save that. Let's have another presenter. Whoops, wrong field. And is a specialist in Excel and works in sales. Okay, so I'm rapidly building some information which is now stored in a central place. People within my team could access this information if I directed them to it and they had the relevant permissions. So you can see very rapidly SharePoint has allowed us to store some interesting and useful information within our site. Whoops. Okay, and we'll just do one more because it really will aid when we look at views in a while. Okay, so excellent. There we have it. We have some views. Now, we have some list items. Now, one of the things which is quite interesting here for me, and you couldn't do this so easily in older versions of the product, is you can sort and filter columns that you're seeing here to get at information quite easily. Now, if I click here on the action bar of the column, you'll see here it allows me to sort the whole list in ascending or descending order, which could help me find information. It also allows me to click on these and filter based on values that are in that column. This is very much like what you see in Excel. So if I click on this, I can make sure that I see only consultants, for instance. Clear that one. Or if I was interested in finding people who were specialists in Excel and in finance, for instance, I could filter by Excel, and then I could go to the department column and then further filter by finance, and there we go, John Dale fits the profile we're looking for. Okay, so you can see we've got fairly powerful methods to find information right here out of the box, just building our own list. One other thing of interest here, if I click over on the ribbon again into list, We're looking at this in the standard view. If we had a lot of information which we needed to put in one go, the form view that we used to enter these before might not be very useful. We can actually flip into Datasheet View here, and when that opens, we see an Excel-like, a grid representation of the list that we're working with. This, whoops. And this allows us to enter information very rapidly indeed. You can imagine if this was numeric information, once again, we could really speed things up by doing this sort of thing. Let's just have a go at this. You see, we still get the drop-downs for our choices. We get a tick list here. So we've not lost anything by being in this view. There we go, we now have a new row, and we could do several quite quickly like this. Let's go back to the standard view. It's just updating the information. This doesn't usually happen, by the way, but let's call it live demo gremlins. Okay, back to standard view. Now, when we're looking at this, we are looking at a view of the information already. We said we'd talk about views. This view is called All Items, and every time that you create a list, you get an All Items view created by default for you. If I drop down this view name, I have some options here: modify, create another view, configure views for this location. I don't have any other views to switch to. Turns out I can create my own new view to slice and dice this information in any way I want. So let's have a look at that. When I choose to create a new view, I get these options. There are several different flavors of view which I could create. There's the standard view, which we were looking at just now. There's a datasheet view that by default has that datasheet grid view, which we would, which is particularly good if you had a lot of dates and times, etc. in your list information. We don't, of course. There's a Gantt view if you had tasks which operated over time for different people. This might be particularly useful. You could even do some basic project management by storing tasks in a list and then having a Gantt view of that information. There's an Access view which allows us to meld the list data with Microsoft Access like functionality, and there's an external tool called Sharepoint Designer, which we're not going to cover today, which can allow you to do even more complicated views. One option I really like is if you have some views already, you get this option: start from an existing view. The All Items is the only one we have, so that's here. If I click on this, it will create a view for me with all the options exactly as they are in the existing view, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel with my new view. Now, in this view, we're going to call this Department Experts. This is going to be a public view so that everyone can see it. I would have the option here to create a personal view that only I could see and use. I'm going to remove columns which I'm not very interested in. There are no extra columns I need to add for now, but by ticking here I could do. I could also change the position of the column in the view by changing these boxes here. At the moment, the view is sorted by the ID of the item, which is an invisible column we haven't really seen. I'd like to sort by department instead, and then I'd secondarily like to sort by presenter name. Further down the page, we have the option to filter here. Now, I could select this, and I could say, for instance, that I only want to show items if the department is equal to HR. Now, you can imagine if I had many items, and actually you could potentially store many thousands of items in a list like this, you might want certain views where you could show, for instance, information from just the one department. So if you have a column with a value such as department. You can filter on it here and get information much more easily than you could otherwise. For our purposes here, no, we don't need to filter. That's just an example. There are several other options here which I encourage you to explore if you get the chance. The last one we'll look at for the purposes of this is the group by. So we can actually group our values by, and once again it's department because we want to see the department experts. We're happy with everything, so we'll just OK that. And now it's created a new view, and you'll notice this one, as we said, is grouped by departments. If I want to change back to the other view, I can just drop down here and click the All Items view instead. I have to say that's not the only way you can do it. There's usually 2 or 3 ways to accomplish the same thing. I could switch views here as well on the ribbon. I could also modify views and even create a new view from there, but we don't have to do that right now. Next, let's look at validation. I would like to introduce some rules to make sure the information people put into my presenters list is suitable for my purposes. So I'm going to go into list settings for this one because I'm going to go in to one of the columns. The column I'm going to introduce validation on is the job title column. One area of this page which we didn't look at before when we changed the column name to job title was this one, column validation. If I drop column validation down, there we go, you'll see that I have the option here to introduce a formula. If the formula returns true, the value in the column that someone has entered when they're creating a new item is good. If it's false, they will get a message which I can define here telling them no, that's no good. So what should we do for job title? Let's say sorry, wrong keys. Let's say, for instance, that if job title is not equal to project manager, then everything is okay. And the reason for this, the validation message will be, sorry, project managers are too busy to be presenters. Some of you might agree with that sentiment. Okay. It's just complained to me because it doesn't like these brackets. Sorry, these quotes. It needs them to be double quotes. And I'm struggling. My Swiss keyboard doesn't show me the characters I think I'm typing. There we go. Project manager. That's okay, that one. Happier result. Okay. Now let's see that in action. So we'll put a project manager in here. Specialism, yeah, save that one. No, sorry, validation message. Project managers are too busy to be presenters. Okay then, I guess we better not add John to the list. Okay, what else can we do here? Well, it's all very well me adding information into these rows, which I've been doing, but if I change something here, who's going to know? What if I change some information here and I find later that I want to get that information back? The change was the wrong thing to do. Well, I can introduce versioning here automatically without me having to keep versions myself. To do this, we're going into the List tab again. We're going over to List Settings. And I promised we'd look at these settings in a while. We have here a thing called versioning settings. So we'll click into that one. We have various things here, but the main one is, do you want to create a version every time you edit an item in this list? And of course, yes, we do. And by default, it allows you to keep major versions of items within this list, which is a concept we'll explain in a little while. gives you the option of limiting the number of versions that are kept. For instance, if we did 30 edits on a particular row, do we really want to keep 30 versions? That could use up a lot of space in our environment, and we probably don't want to do that. The value that you might want to set to limit versions is going to depend on your own circumstances in your organization, but the general best practice, which I see in a lot of organizations, is to limit major versions to 5. So let's OK that one. And one thing we'll do to really illustrate this is we're going to add an extra column into the view of the list. It's already in there actually. So let's modify our view before we do anything else. And we're going to add the version column, which was hiding down here all along. OK, that one. Now we see that everything in our list is version 1.0. OK, John Dale has done a lot of good work recently. We don't want him to be a junior associate anymore. It's really time he was a full associate. So let's edit John's information here. He's got a promotion. Okay. John now has new information, and you'll notice that the version number for John's row is now at 2. If I drop down the edit control block for this row, I have this option here to view version history. Clicking on version history, I can see that John had this information in version 1, and in version 2 we notice his job title has now changed. If I discovered that the edit was wrong and his job title shouldn't have been changed at all, rather than having to go in and just edit again, I can actually drop down a menu here and I could restore the version 1 information, put everything back to as it was there. So you can see this could be really useful. If I wanted to save space, of course, I could also just delete that prior version. Okay, so that was major versioning. One other thing which is really interesting is the ability to be able to create relationships between lists. You may remember that when we defined our speciality and our department columns, we made them choice fields, and we typed out the different values that these could be. Now it could be that there was a central source list of departments, for instance, or a source list of specialities. So instead of defining them here, for instance, in a column in every list where we might want to have department, we might want to define department in a single list and use it in many places. To demonstrate this then, I'm going to create a new list of departments, and I'm going to use that instead of the choice field which we put here. So once again we go to the Site Actions menu, More Options, we get the daunting window, Filter by List, Custom List, and we're going to call our list Department, create that. Now for our purposes, we only need one column in department list, and it can be a text one. So I'm going to do that little trick in list settings again, which we saw, click into title, and we're going to change this to be department. Okay. Now we can add a few values into this. So here we are, HR, Finance, Information Services, Accounting, whoops, Sales. You get the picture. Okay, so we now have a list with some values in it. Let's go back to our presenters list, which you'll notice is now automatically in the navigation over here because we created it before. And we're going to create a new column in the list this time, and this is something called a lookup column. So this is going to be called department lookup, just to differentiate it from the other one. So lookup column. Once again, the options down here change to suit the type of column that we have, and we get a choice, well, which list do you want to pull this value from? So we have a look in here, department. Which column in there do we want? Well, there's only one, so we get to choose that. Are there any extra columns that sit alongside that? These are those hidden ones that we don't usually see that we'd like to bring through as well. No, none of those are really useful to us. Down here we have the option to define what sort of relationship this is. We could enforce a thing called referential integrity between the two lists. So we could, for instance, restrict delete. We could say that if a list is using any given value from our department list, we wouldn't be able to delete it from our department list. We could also say, cascade delete, if we deleted a department here, such as finance, any row in another list which used this lookup to the finance would actually be deleted automatically as a kind of cleanup. So we have some very basic relationships that we can do here. Let's OK that one. And we now have our department field. If you want to see how that looks in action, you see now it's effectively a drop-down. We could then delete the original department list which we had before. One benefit of this is in terms of update. If I came up with a new name for information services, perhaps the department became known as information technology instead. Stranger things have happened. If this was in a choice field and I changed it, anyone who currently had that in their row, you would have to go in and edit the row again to update the value there. If I'm using a lookup column, if I changed information services to information technology within the lookup, every row which used that one would be updated automatically without me having to go and edit again. Now imagine if we've got 10,000 presenters in this list, you're saving yourself an awful lot of time by not having to do that. So choose the one which is right for you. I will say though that that lookups have a few performance, not issues, but if you use too many of them, it might run a bit more slowly. But up to about 6 is absolutely fine in any given list. So that was the whistle-stop tour of lists. So let's have a look at the PowerPoint. Yes, it's still there. And see what we've learned. Well, we've discussed that virtually all SharePoint content is stored in a list. We mentioned that lists allow multiple views to allow sorting, filtering, grouping different columns. We can introduce validation into lists. We can have a thing called content approval, which actually we're going to look at with libraries. We have item versioning, and we can create relationships between lists. Okay, excellent. Okay, going back to our environment here then. We haven't really looked at libraries yet. Now libraries are just another type of list, but they have some extra features, such as allowing you to check in and check out items. They allow you to have major and minor versions, and they allow you to store actual documents in them, actual files. They give us a certain amount of Office integration as well, such as this edit in Microsoft Word being available there in the menu. To move on with this, we're actually going to look at a few concepts which we will then enable within SharePoint itself. So some introductions. It's very common in a SharePoint environment to have readers. Readers consume company information. They have the right to read information, search for information, print information, but not to edit information. We also have contributors. They have the rights, their role is to write information which is stored, for instance, within SharePoint, so they can create and edit documents and pages. And then we have this guy over here, the approver. He reviews information which the contributor has produced, and he approves it if it's suitable for publishing so that our reader over there can see it. What does this mean then? Well, this is the publishing process which you can optionally enable within these lists and libraries within SharePoint. Okay, so we have a couple of contributors here, contributor A, contributor B. They work on content within SharePoint. Contributor A creates a document in Word, and he saves that as a draft version 0.1. This is a minor version, and we'll see why we have those in a moment, into SharePoint. It's now in a draft state. Contributor B takes that out and works on it, and when he saves his changes and checks it in, he gets a new version, version 0.2, a new draft version. Contributor A decides that the version 0.2 is ready for prime time. It's ready to be published out and for people to see it. So contributor A publishes the document, but instead of it being immediately available to people to read it, it's actually held in this awaiting approval state, because we want things to be approved before they're read. We want to make sure they're correct. Our approver gets a message telling him that something needs to be approved. So he clicks on the link in the message, he reviews the document. In this case, he decides everything's good, and he says, yep, approve it. The document is therefore pushed into a new state of published, and it gets a new version number. It's major version, version 1.0. At this point, our readers can now see that information and read it. The reader was completely unaware of the editing process and the interaction between the contributors and the approver and the draft state of the document before. Okay, well, why do we cover this? It's because we can actually enable this. If we have content which warrants it, we can enable this in libraries within SharePoint. Okay, so this is our document library, which we saw before, and we have a single document in here for now. If I click on the Library tab, which is the equivalent of the List tab we saw before, go into Library Settings, I have the option here, going into versioning again, of not only enabling versioning, which I can do here, and let's set those all-important limits again. You'll find 5 and 2 is the magic number. I can require that that content approval process, which we saw just now, happens, i.e. an approver has got to say yes before this is going to be published out for people to read. We also are going to say that documents need to be checked out before they can be edited, i.e. people have an explicit lock on the document while they're editing it, and then they can check it back in again. So we'll OK this. And one thing we'll do, because, no, it's in the view again. I always get caught out. In the view, we're going to put the version number again, just so we can see what's happening. So there we go, hiding at the bottom as always. OK. And there we have this current document is version 1. By the way, we never really saw adding items to a document library. It's not exactly the same as for a list, because in this case we're actually storing a file in there as well. So if I click Add Document, it's going to open a window, and I'll be able to browse to a file to upload here. Yeah, things should be easier than this. Come on now. Ah, there we go. Okay, so I happen to have some more training material here that I want to upload. So I'll select this, I'll OK that, and it'll get uploaded to the library. You'll notice I get the option to fill out more information about it, such as the title. I'll save this, and that document is now stored as a draft version in the library. The reason it's draft is because no one has ever approved this for people to see. It's only just been created. It's never been reviewed. As such, it's a minor version, 0.1. Notice it doesn't have a whole number at the front. It has a fraction number in the second digit. That indicates that it's a minor version. Okay, Excellent, so we now have content here. If I was to edit just the properties of this document here, I don't want to, I forgot to check this out, and as you saw, I said that everything has to be checked out before it's changed, so it's telling me, do you want to check it out? Yes, please check it out for me. I could actually just make some basic changes to the title, save that. All I've done is save it. It's still in draft. It's still checked out. What I want to do is I want to check it back in so other people could work on it now. And do you just want to check it in? No, I think this is ready for the prime time night. I would like to publish it. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to OK. And you'll notice now we have this column which is showing us automatically the state of this, and it's saying that this is pending. That means it's pending approval. We're waiting for an approver to review this and say everything is okay. So it's been held in this draft state, version 1.1. If I come along, just so happens I'm an approver as well, so I can approve this myself. So I drop down this. I could also do this via an email, by the way. And I'm going to say, I could reject it, say no, we don't want this, but no, it's fine for our purposes right now. Approved. We're okay that one, it becomes approved, and it's now a fully fledged version of 2.0. So we've looked at there the ability to store documents within a library, to have major and minor versioning, and to have content approval and check in and check out. Let's go back to our death by PowerPoint. Here we go. And this is everything I said just now. One thing to mention, I've been talking about columns a lot. When we talk about columns in a library, they can also be called tags or properties or metadata. You may hear these terms bandied around the organization. Basically, they're a way of telling us more about the information that's in that document or file held in the library. Okay, one final important concept to talk about then is that of site columns and content types. So far, we've been creating lists as a one-off usage, which is all very well, but what if some of the columns I created, like the department column, like the speciality column, or the series of columns that I group together to form a useful purpose in my list, what if I wanted to reuse those elsewhere? Well, what am I talking about? Let's look at an example. We have here John. He's the guy who didn't quite get into our presenter list before. He comes up with a great idea. He pitches to the company, he pitches to his department, first of all, information services, that they should store employee appraisal information for information services in a SharePoint list. This is going to be secured so only the manager and the relevant people can see it, but it means no more paper copies floating around the office, knowing what the most current version is, etc. It's a great idea, the company loves it, and information services get a lot of benefit out of it. So much benefit, in fact, that HR comes along to him and says, hey, we were just talking to finance, marketing, and the other departments. We want an appraisal list to use in our own departments as well. We need one each. We don't want to use yours. This creates a lot of problems for John. John has got to go around each of the department sites, create an appraisal list from scratch so that they can each use it. It gets worse because after a while the company decides that an objectives field should also be stored in the list, and because he's created different lists for every single department, he has to once again go around and do the work to update that list in several different places. It could have all been so different, however. If John had created a definition of which columns worked together usefully together, he could have created these as site columns so that they could be used in different places within the site and reused. He could have created this as a content type, which is effectively a template of which columns you might want to use again together. If he'd done this, when the other departments came along to say we want that list as well, he could have used that content type as a template, as the kind of cookie cutter, to easily produce instances of the list exactly like the one he produced in the first place. And the difference would be, in this case, if he introduced a new column to it, there was an update such as the objectives one we spoke about before, it would be easy to actually introduce that to the original content type and automatically push it out to update all these different lists in the different departments. Further, if he defined some of his columns, such as manager name, as a site column, he could have reused that in other content types and other lists, not just the one he originally intended it for. So you can see, if you start introducing site columns and content types for information that's particularly useful in your company, you get this reuse of your definitions of what information is useful together. Now, I don't really have time, I'm afraid, to demonstrate content types in any real detail here. All I will say, just to give you a pointer, is you define these things, and really you want to look into this more if you want to do it, but you go to Site Actions, Site Settings, in the top level site, and you will see some options here, and please don't be daunted by all the other stuff here. I wish I could hide it. In galleries you have site columns and site content types, and by clicking within there you can actually define these things which I'm talking about just now. Okay, so finishing up then, because I'm sure you're getting tired of my voice. Site columns and content types, usually if you define columns in a list level, they're not reusable in other lists, but if you use site columns and content types, you effectively have this schema, as it's known, which you can reuse in many different sites. Site columns are also reusable column definitions. There are actually many benefits to content types, and I strongly encourage you to look into them further if you decide to use SharePoint seriously. Now, many content types are already defined for you. They come out of the box with SharePoint for calendars, for task lists, for document libraries, and you can work with those. You can extend them yourself if you so wish. I've only really scratched the surface of SharePoint and lists and libraries due to the short nature of this webinar. There is so much more that we could cover which would be of interest and use to you. For further information, I can recommend to you my blog, which is www.the-north.com/SharePoint. I will be posting a copy of this presentation onto that blog in the near future if you'd like that for reference. Also, of course, if you have any technical questions, a wonderful place to ask questions is expertsexchange.com, and I am available to answer SharePoint questions on the site there. Okay, so without further ado, does anyone have any questions I could answer before we finish up?
Actually, Jamie, a lot of people had questions. My goodness, I think this is probably one of our most popular webinars thus far. We had a very high number of attendees and a very large number of questions, and not necessarily about your presentation. People are saying that you did an awesome job. So if it's okay with you, actually what I think I'd like to do, since it's getting close to the noon hour here on the West Coast, and we like to keep these webinars to an hour, I have a copy of all of the questions, and I can actually email those questions to you, and then I can email out your answers to everyone after the fact, if that would be okay.
Okay.
Perfect. That sounds great. I know that I speak for everyone whenever I say that this was just such an awesome presentation. I am not incredibly familiar with SharePoint, but I learned quite a bit from watching your presentation. So I cannot thank you enough. I hope that all of you will visit not only Jamie's blog, but also Experts Exchange, and you can definitely get great access to guys like Jamie 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on Experts Exchange. I'm going to put my email up here at the end so that you guys can, guys and gals can see my email. If you have any other questions, you can email those to me. I will be getting in touch with all of you with the answers that Jamie provides to your questions, as well as the video of this recording whenever it's available. So I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and thank you again, Jamie. This was great.